Talk more about the ANC's National Working Committee's meeting is our politics reporter, Samkele Maseko. Samkele, very good evening to you. As the GNU topped the agenda at the ANC's briefing today, what we do know, at least for now, is that the GNU is still intact. What were some of the highlights?
The highlight in this particular press briefing that was held by the Secretary General Fikile Mbalula was essentially that notion that the ANC will not be begging the Democratic Alliance. The ANC has resolved to ultimately open up the negotiation space of the Government of National Unity to all political formations, once again realizing that they can no longer bank on the Democratic Alliance. Also, they can no longer bank on the economic freedom fighters that's not part of the Government of National Unity, but voted against the adoption of the fiscal framework of the budget of the country. Because we must put one point categorically clear, that in Parliament, they were not voting for the adoption of the budget as yet. They were voting for the adoption of the fiscal framework of the budget of the budget of the country at this point in time. And thus, the ANC will now be going in the next week to negotiate with all other political formations, led by its Secretary General, to try and get a consensus in Parliament in order for the adoption of the budget vote and ultimately for the vote on the expropriations bill as well that will be in Parliament. So the most startling point was the ANC basically reading the Riot Act in terms of other reports of media houses to the Democratic Alliance, that you can no longer just continue causing chaos, being in government and being in opposition at the same time.
As the ANC plans to engage parties on the budget over the next 5 days, what will that look like? I mean, who are they talking to?
They are talking to all political formations that are represented within the National Assembly. They will be engaging with the EFF, with the Democratic Alliance, once again, with Action SA, Rise Mzansi, BOSA, the MK Party. They will engaging with all the formations that are represented within the National Assembly, all of those who are within the GNU and those outside of the GNU, to try and find consensus. They will also engage with labor, civil society, business, their own alliance partners such as COSATU and the SABC as well, in order to bring all sectors of society on board as they negotiate the consensus over the appropriations bill and ultimately as well on the passing of the budget of the country. So essentially they will be engaging all political formations, but the DA has openly said they are willing to engage with the ANC when it comes to the issues that pertain to the sharing of power. They feel as if the ANC wants to ultimately get everything on their own and not engage with other political formations and have a clear power sharing deal, particularly with the DA's proposals when it comes to the cessation of the ports in Gqeberha, in Durban, and ultimately in Cape Town, and also Operation of Vulindlela, which are some of the points the ANC does not agree with when it comes to the economic and policy framework, economic framework of the country with the Democratic Alliance. That is the point of divergence between these two particular parties. And now the involvement of the business fraternity and how the business fraternity is essentially trying to drive the political landscape of the country. You've seen the president of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, and president of the country, on Sunday, putting his foot down that the business fraternity is not elected. They're not elected public representatives, and that is not their space, and they will not dictate or influence the ANC in whatever way when it comes to its relationship with the Democratic Alliance.
I mean, we just listened to the party's John Steenhuisen saying that they're not privy to the general power-sharing relationship. Among some of the other matters today, the meeting dealt with the conduct of the DA. I mean, we heard quite a great deal from the ANC Secretary General talking about the DA accusing the opposition of acting like an opposition force.
Indeed, the Secretary General of the ANC, just like many other ANC leaders, they are united on this particular point, that the DA has got double standards. It acts as a party in government, and on the other end acts like an opposition. So they are saying that there must be a clear definition of whether the DA is inside government or outside of government. And they can't just cause chaos and act willy-nilly, and saying that there must be rules and guidelines now that govern the government of national unity. So the parties that sign the statement of intent, they will now go further to have rules and regulations that will govern this particular conglomerate of political formations that are working together to form the South African government, that there are rules that they've got to adhere to. And if you fall short of adherence of those particular rules, then you will ultimately be dealt with and saying that they can't just operate on a goodwill and a word of mouth and the statement of intent that has no clear guidelines and rules and regulations.
I mean, just listening to Mbalula also speaking at great length about the difficulty of finding another source of revenue to replace that 0.5 percentage point VAT increase. And that essentially is the big headache that National Treasury is grappling with right now.
It's not only National Treasury grappling with that particular headache of finding that particular shortfall of about that 20 billion rands in the South African budget. It's also political formations and members of parliament who have bottled and come together this particular week to try and find alternative ways of getting that particular shortfall, as opposed to hiking taxes within the country, whether it be personal income tax or value-added tax. That is ultimately a bone of contention. Now, you remember at some point, value-added tax within the country was at 10%. It ultimately jumped to 14%. Then around 2018 or so, it was ultimately jumped up and pushed up to that particular 15%. And now you've under the tenure of Malusi Nkanyezi and President Ramaphosa after taking over from President Zuma. Now there is that particular proposal to further jump it to 15.5% in this financial year, and in the next financial year by another 0.5% that will ultimately take it to about 16% of value-added tax within the country. And that's an issue that labor, civil society, political formations have not taken lightly. Hence, you've seen the likes of Rise Mzansi, Action SA in particular, Herman Mashaba saying that they will not support any increase in taxes, particularly VAT. And if the ANC goes against its word, then they will withdraw their particular supply and demand voting arrangement with the African National Congress, particularly with the ANC being upset with the Democratic Alliance that is seemingly not towing the line.
Very well. Thank you so much, Samkele Maseko, there, giving us a sense of what came out of the ANC's National Working Committee's meeting.